Good evening, I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. Right here in our studio, we get to welcome back the veteran reporter and anchorman, Doug McKelway. Doug and I first met when he was hosting TVN's Centerpoint show, and I was his guest. Well, I have to say there are still days where I think it was better when he was the one asking the questions. Doug, you've been covering issues on a national level for a long time now, and we're always grateful for the insight that you bring. We've got a lot to discuss today. Thanks for coming back to Nashville.
Oh, it's great to see you. I hope you had a great Christmas.
We had a great Christmas.
Wonderful.
You know, I was determined to begin this year with a focus on good news. In fact, I wrote a good news journal to share with friends and people in the congregation and beyond, determined to celebrate the good things happening. When I woke up yesterday morning to the news of a terror event in New Orleans, I had a visceral response to the news reporting. The first thing I heard the FBI say was, "This is not a terror event." Never mind the fact that there's an ISIS flag on the back of the pickup truck. You know, I'm pretty certain that if the KKK had been spray painted across the tailgate of that truck, they wouldn't have begun by saying this isn't a racist event. And I was reminded that in spite of the determination to find the good things happening around us, we have a breach of trust in our nation that has to be rebuilt. If we're going to find a better way forward, we're going to have to learn to trust some institutions that are essential to our well-being. The FBI, I think, is a part of that. And I don't know what will come with the new administration and new leadership, but a part of what has to happen for us to get to a healthier place is we have to trust them again. You know, we still don't have the report on the shooting in Butler, Pennsylvania, when President-elect Trump was shot. We don't really have an adequate explanation of what happened in Las Vegas with that mass shooting. We had a shooting in a school in Nashville where there was a written manifesto that's never been released to the public, and the list goes on. So there is trust to be rebuilt. The legacy media, the people we trust to tell us the truth, have spent the last 3 or 4 years either underreporting or ignoring or trying to convince us that the president's health wasn't failing, no matter what we could see with our own eyes. Well, all of that seemed to bubble to the top in me yesterday when I heard the report that this isn't terrorism. We don't know what the outcome will be. I'm sure it'll take days and weeks before all of that news comes to the forefront. But I want to begin this year. I'm still watching, I'm still listening, I'm still thinking, and from that I pray we can begin to reconstruct trust in these institutions that are essential to our well-being. We can't afford to be divided politically, folks. We have to have a confidence that we can tell one another the truth, even when we disagree on ideological issues. That's my prayer for this year, and I couldn't think of anybody better than Doug to help us start this. So we'll begin with the shock that took place in New Orleans on New Year's Day. It was an inexplicable way to start a new year. An ISIS-inspired former U.S. military man used a truck to kill as many people as possible. 14 people, plus the shooter, died at this point. A second incident, a bomb-filled Tesla truck exploding in front of a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. The initial reports suggest that downtown New Orleans had the resources allocated to have prevented such an attack. What do we know about the root of this kind of madness?
Well, you know, and on the ISIS front, I think it's really important to see how this New Orleans event really fits into what their pattern was during their heyday, when ISIS was most strong, before Donald Trump took them out with a lot of missile strikes and things of that sort. But their process was to go for the weak and vulnerable. They used the internet to great effect to lure young, disaffected men into their ranks. Well, this wasn't a young man. He was a reasonably successful human being, had uneventful military career for the most part, served in Afghanistan for a while, went into IT work, went into financial services, was making over $6K, but he had 2 divorces, the last of which was extremely stressful for him from what I've read initially here. To the point where he was broke. He's living in a mobile home, had chickens and goats and animals out in his backyard. He'd taken a very steep fall and looked at the world as in my estimation here, as a hopeless place. There was no place for him at all. He chose, rather than turn to goodness to get out of that dilemma, turn to evil to get out of that dilemma. What kind of connections he had officially or formally with ISIS, we simply don't know. But to me, the takeaway from that is that there are a lot of organizations who are seeking out disaffected young people who feel a sense of hopelessness and lure them in to do more evil. That's an age-old dilemma, as you well know. And so we got to look out for ISIS recruitment videos, things like this. We got to find out what this guy's history was with it, or was he just a lone wolf inspired by the kind of things that ISIS did? We know that there was an earlier attack in Germany. That may have been his inspiration for this. And there have been many others like that. And we've seen pleadings from various terrorist leaders as if you don't have access to a gun or a weapon, use what you have at hand, a rock or a car. And a car is a vicious weapon. I don't know if you've seen the actual video of that car building up speed, but he was moving at a huge pace, just really fast. And you're going to cause just terrible damage when you have that access.
I know we don't want to create hatred toward Islam, and we shouldn't.
Yeah.
But don't we have to acknowledge that too many Islamic leaders globally encourage this kind of destructive behavior and plant the seeds in the hearts of those that are receptive to it?
I think there is a case to be made for that, a very strong case to be made for that. And again, I don't know what the way out is, but I think in the case of the fundamentalism of Islam, that a strict interpretation of stoning people to death and things of that sort has outgrown its usefulness, can we say? Yeah. Let's move on from there. And I think hope lies with a lot of moderate Muslims who realize that. There are certainly any number of them here in the United States, but at the same time, I understand that his house in Texas was right in adjacent to a mosque. I'm very curious to see what kinds of teachings went on there, what his neighbors knew about him, what his neighbors knew about the teachings of that mosque and who the imams were working there. I had in my neighborhood in Falls Church, Virginia, a mosque not far away, which is where one of the great imams of ISIS preached, and he instructed his disciples there to embark upon this Islamic fundamentalism carnage. And it's where many of the perpetrators of the 9/11 hijackings worshipped. Wow. So, it's really going to be incumbent upon authorities in this country to keep a close eye on that kind of thing. I think in the case of the FBI, during the Biden administration, there was a misdirection, whether it was completely politicized, as I suspect it may have been, I don't know, but it was to focus on white lone wolf terrorists. The hillbilly out in the woods with his rifle who wants to wreak damage. And I could never quite understand that, why that emphasis was put upon that, because it's never really come to fruition. To my knowledge, I suspect that January 6th may have had a lot to do with that. But it seemed to me that it was misdirection almost. And this latest attack, these two latest attacks, are a reminder that maybe something else is afoot.
Yeah, I think we have had a focus maybe in the wrong place. We've been angry at parents at school board meetings, calling them domestic terrorists.
So true.
And ignoring people who are clearly misguided and misled. One of the things I think we're looking for is a repudiation of this from the Islamic community.
Right.
I mean,
I
heartfelt,
sure hope so.
widespread. I think we'll see it.
And when it comes to authority figures in this country and the FBI, I always like to point out in these cases, because I know FBI agents whose meaning and heart and desire for good work is all in the right place. I hate to whitewash this whole thing with a paint rather with a broad brush about the dysfunction of the FBI, because I suspect there are a lot of field agents and special agents out there who want to see a change of leadership. Sure. and see this kind of misdirection and question why is the Bureau focusing on these kinds of things when we could be focused on more pressing issues.
Amen. We'll be back in just a moment. We've got a lot more to talk to Doug about. In the meantime, if you want to get in on the conversation, you can send us your notes to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're here with veteran reporter and newsman Doug McKelway. They tell me that Bourbon Street has reopened and the playoff game tonight will go forward in New Orleans. That is some good news today. We can use that. Yeah. But Doug, let's move to the border and the additional crime that's come with an open border. Despite his public commitment to make the transition to Mr. Trump useful, it seems that Joe Biden is still trying to take shots at the incoming president, despite the multiple episodes of crime by those who are here illegally. And that's on top of the state budgets that are being drained of dwindling resources. Mr. Biden has even tried to sell pieces of the wall, but the judge seems to have stopped him for now. Do you really believe this is how President Biden wants to be remembered, as an open border that has welcomed all these people into the nation?
I don't know if he wants to be remembered for that, or if he doesn't remember what he's being remembered for, or whether he's calling the shots. We simply don't know. I suspect it's a staff who are basically orchestrating all this stuff. A lot of Obama holdovers in the administration. That's my guess, but I have no great insight into that, just based upon what I've read. But it makes no sense. It really does not. He has opened the door, Joe Biden has, to any number of potential avenues for criminality or malfeasance on the part of people who are coming across that border. For instance, not a lot of Americans know, because a lot of the media never reported it, that there are tens of thousands of Chinese nationals who came across the southern border. Tens of thousands of them. What are they up to? Why are they here? Are they going to become university professors? Or are they going to become spies? Are they going to become terrorists? We don't know. And this is not a Central and South American problem. It's a worldwide problem. People are coming to the United States. It's got to stop. And I think Donald Trump will do it. That said, it's not going to be easy for him to do this, because the much despised mainstream media, and people are fleeing in droves from watching mainstream networks in the aftermath of the election now, is not dead yet. And I suspect that one of the ways that they're going to resurrect themselves is by intense coverage of this plan to deport illegal immigrants. Because there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to find the grieving mother with her small child on the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post, day after day after day. All the network newscasts are going to feature the crying children. My daddy is being deported. It's going to be, they will tap into their emotive news coverage like nothing you've seen before. So be prepared for that. I think it's one of the reasons that the Trump administration seems to be focusing pretty much exclusively at this point on deporting criminals, those who are already in jail, or those who are on the lam from jail, or those who have some criminal record in this country. I think that's where the focus is going. We've heard them say that. Trump himself has been on camera saying that he doesn't want to break up families. So these are good things, because I think the political consequences, the media consequences of him embarking on a wholesale sort of willy-nilly deportation might be very destructive to his presidency.
One thing that seems to be very clear already is that the incoming border czar is going to get a lot of help. Listen to what he's already saying.
I have received hundreds of emails from retired Border Patrol agents, retired ICE agents, retired police officers, people that just left the military that are begging to come in and be a part of this. So we got to really see what is the money available, what can we buy for resources to arrest as many people as we can based on priority.
This seems to be a far cry different from our previous border czar. You know, I think we're both waiting to see how the American public will respond, but it does seem hopeful that we'll at least close the border.
I'm not sure who you refer to as the border czar, unless it was Kamala Harris. I guess that's
she
who
got
you're
the
referring
title.
to. But everybody involved with immigration and illegal immigration in the Biden administration was at fault for this. It's disastrous. It was disastrous. I was looking at some numbers of the number of the people who have crossed the border compared to the great migrations to the United States in the early part of the 20th century and earlier in the 19th century. The great Irish migrations, a drop in the bucket compared to the number of people who have crossed the border legally. And all those people from Ireland and the other, from Italy, from Eastern and Western Europe, came here legally at Ellis Island, as opposed to what we're seeing today. So at least that was legalized. And what we're seeing today completely dwarfs the numbers of the early 20th century.
It does. Well, here's something that seems pretty new to me. The liberal media has actually begun to accept some blame for not doing enough real reporting about President Biden's health. You know, whether they hid it, they didn't recognize it, for whatever reason, do you think they're going to continue to build some integrity with the American public again?
As I alluded to earlier, they're losing ratings. Now, some of that is to be expected because the election is over. People were watching that intensely. They want to see what the latest is in the horse race coverage that all the networks did. But there's something more afoot here. People have lost trust in that institution, the mainstream media. And I know a lot of reporters who are licking their wounds right now. Cheryl Atkinson, the former CBS News reporter, has compiled a list of the major hoaxes and mistakes and misstatements that mainstream media partook in over the past 4 years. And I think the latest number she had was about 151. I won't begin to go through them all, but you know what they are, I know what they are, and most of your viewers know what they are, and simply don't trust them anymore. I can't pick up the New York Times and read it and take it at face value. I look at it just to say, okay, what's wrong with this? Or the lead is buried 15 paragraphs down. They finally cut to the chase at 16 paragraphs down before setting their woke agenda all the way down the line. So they've got a lot to do if they want to resurrect themselves. Elon Musk, on the other hand, says they're all dead. They'll never recover, that the new way to go is X. And as much as I admire Elon tremendously, I think he's the Thomas Edison of the 21st century. He's also a good salesman. And he paid $40 billion for X. So, he wants to earn that money back to some degree. Not that that's all that much money for him. But because when you go to X, for example, you have to, there's a lot of chaff that you got to separate from the wheat, and I find that very, very frustrating. So that's not the final solution here in terms of trusted media sources, because there's just too much misinformation and all that. You have to really sort through it all to find the nuggets of truth. That said, X is the place where news breaks now. If you really want to find breaking news, it's not the wire services, it's not the Associated Press, which is veered leftward. It is X, because you put it in the search function and what you're interested in, and you will find something very legitimate there and fresh and new. So that's its real benefit. I'm also really encouraged by the fact that you see a lot of independent news organizations arising from the detritus of mainstream media, like Substack. Is a wonderful thing. It may not be your perfect political alignment, but you'll find it there, and you'll find contrary points of view, lengthy news articles that will allow you to be really well informed in a neutral kind of a way, where you're getting both perspectives and you're not getting the spin that we see in mainstream media. But this is fascinating to me, what's happened to mainstream media. I don't know where it went wrong. It was a gradual process, but in many respects it is completely broken. And Trump's election is the potential for a great realignment.
I pray you're a prophet. We've got a 30-minute show, but there's a lot we want to talk about, Doug. Okay. Can you stay around for another show?
Absolutely.
Thank you for being back in Nashville.
Sure.
Okay. Well, in a moment, I'll be back with some thoughts of my own to share. We'll be right back. Thank you for taking the time to send us your emails. Your thoughts and opinions do a great deal to shape our show. And an email from Bill. He said, I had an idea that perhaps you'd be interested in doing a series like PBS had, but with a biblical focus. Steve Allen hosted a show back in 1977 called Meeting of the Minds, where he had a panel of historical figures. It was very interesting and quite educational. Like I said, just a thought. Well, Bill, I appreciate your thought. Makes me smile, the thought of me on PBS. That would be a God event in the 21st century. We've had several suggestions for programming and new programs. We'll keep you posted. If you'll stay with us, I'll be right back. If you miss our broadcast, you can see this program every day on our YouTube channel. They post each day's episode at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so you can see it at your leisure. Hope you'll join us tomorrow. Doug McKelway will be back to talk about current events and what's happening in our nation. For now, good night from Nashville, and God bless.